All right, we want to go a little deep into something that I've been scheming on a lot this week and wrote up a long Twitter thread about, which is we're seeing this new era, and I think we're going to see a big trend this year of Web3 games leveraging for the first time traditional UA and more specifically traditional mobile user acquisition at scale, which so far, like those have been two really separate worlds. And there's been a number of reasons for this. So we'll link to the thread, but what prompted this is we saw a huge story in Web3 early in 2024 about a particular game called Heroes of Mavia. And none of this is to besmirch them. I think they actually were really savvy with how they executed this. Heroes of Mavia completely overtook the narrative in Web3 gaming for a period of time because they achieved 1 million players out of nowhere, basically. They launched the game and within a few days had 1 million players. And this was all over my timeline on X, like people couldn't stop talking about it. And so I went a little deep and decided to research okay, what actually happened here? Because it's a mobile game. So, this data is available on platforms like Sensor Tower, Data AI. So in this thread, I walked through some of the Sensor Tower data from their launch, and we can actually kind of see the narrative here of what happened and its impact on the game launch, on the token price, etc. So what we were able to see from the launch of Heroes of Mavia was that they did a large amount of user acquisition in countries like India, Pakistan, Philippines, Turkey. Those were the 4 largest areas. And that a bulk of their now getting close to 2 million downloads come from these low monetizing countries. Now, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. In fact, sometimes this can be a really cost-effective strategy if you're getting those users at the right price point. But what's lost from that is the kind of nuance in the narrative as Web3 digested. In Web3 and on X, the narrative was, oh my God, mainstream adoption is here, 1 million plus players in the first few days for a Web3 game. It's a breakthrough. And very smartly, Heroes of Mavia launched their token for public trading. I have that in the thread too, basically almost day and day with when they started this massive UA push.
So clever.
Yeah, and you see they drove their token price up from like the $2-ish range to the $9-ish range in a matter of days.
Crazy.
And so there's a few things to unpack here. Like, I'm going to assume and give them benefit of the doubt that they're doing competent UA as far as like traditional performance marketing, unless I see otherwise. But by doing their token launch, this kind of like Web3 liquidity lever and funding mechanism that they have, in conjunction with doing this growth push, which is unheard of in Web3 to bring in 1 million players within the first month, but is fairly commonplace for serious mobile games in the traditional place. They're breaking new ground,
right? But
they're breaking new ground by doing pretty old school things at the end of the day. And I think this is going to be a really savvy strategy for Web3 games for a few months. And what this really reminded me of is the glory days of free-to-play mobile, where every company focused on top-line growth, how many installs they could generate, how much top-line revenue, without really looking at profitability, and use that to build these growth stories leading to like successful M&A and like the glory years of the biggest M&A activity in mobile. And to me, this kind of rhymes with this, where again, none of this is saying anything bad about Heroes of Mavia. It's more like how the market reacted to this. At the end of the day, they used traditional UA to tell like a really crazy Web3 growth story, which had this really crazy impact on their token price. I don't have the number in front of me. I want to say they raised the token valuation to like $2.5 billion. And at the end of the day, they maybe spent like, it's low to medium 6 figures in paid UA. So you can do like a 6-figure UA push, bring essentially your Web3 equity to the multi-billion-dollar mark, and you still get the value of those users and any in-app purchase that those users would normally provide. So it's a pretty brilliant strategy on their part. It's going to be like copied like hell over the next few months. But yeah, Xander, do you think we're going to see more of this? Why do you think it's taken this long to see this kind of strategy executed?
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. I mean, hello chart boost, right? We're basically back in the early days of mobile UA, which I think is kind of funny. Good marketing is understanding the message to the time and the place in a cost-effective way. They nailed it. They knocked it out of the park. Super, super impressive. We have to just sort of give credence where credence is due. One question, is Heroes of Mavia a custodial wallet system? Do these users know that they are Web3 users?
From what I've heard of them, the game is very inspired by Clash of Clans. They're pretty open with that, which I think, honestly, that's smart as well. This team's doing a lot of smart things. I'm a big believer in like when you're innovating, try to innovate on one primary axis. If everything is totally foreign to a user, it's really hard for them to adapt. But if it's like, hey, here's Clash of Clans, but there's an additional layer to unpack when you get deep enough in the game. I believe that they use non-custodial wallets early on in the user funnel, but I don't want to claim that I'm an expert on their game economy. It's not one of these games where you have to like create a wallet before you start playing. Like you can come in completely as a free-to-play player. It's fully playable as just a Web2 game. And you also see that in Sensor Tower. Right. It generated a non-trivial amount of revenue. I want to say it was like about 200K so far has been generated in that purchase. And again, that doesn't mean the game only made 200K in revenue. They have that plus whatever they're getting from the secondary market, from selling their own liquidity positions in their token.
Yeah.
And it's probably doing extremely well for them overall financially.
Yeah. So I think at the top line, that makes sense. That's the right strategy too, in general. Like if these are net new Web3 users, you want to make sure that you're able to get them engaged, ideally monetize them, and then transition them over time. So strategically, it makes a ton of sense. My gut, without digging super deep into this, is that the market reaction probably is not commensurate with the actual behavior of the game. So what I mean by that is like, I think people saw how much hype this got and probably drove this up in a way that's probably not economically sustainable for the long term. And my guess is this token will come down over time. I have no insider information on that. But that being said, like I think from a business strategy perspective, it totally makes sense. I anticipate we see a lot of people try to copy this. I imagine you and I will have a bunch of sales calls where people are trying to say, hey, can we do exactly what Mavia did?
Right.
And I think that there will be a time and a place now where this will work. And so if you're savvy, I imagine that there's a really great window of opportunity here before the overall ecosystem sort of understands the nuances of what's happening. If you're trying to sell an NFT or just raise the value of a token, I think this probably makes a lot of sense. I think overall, over time, the efficacy of this tactic will go down. But in the interim, this makes like a ton of sense that I imagine we'll see this playbook play out over the next 3 to 6 months at least.
Right. Why is now the time that we're starting to see this strategy happen? Because, in theory, people could have been doing this years ago. And for me, I boiled it down to 3 points, which I call out in the thread. The first is that we're now seeing Web3 games with Web3 components commonplace on iOS and Android.
Right.
And that's been a combination of Apple and Google evolving their policy to allow more, but also just more teams just shipping the games and them not getting banned for one reason or another. So I think like it's kind of half and half. Half these games comply with Google and Apple's new policy, and half of them they're in spite of it. The second part of that is the games exist. The market for Web3 gaming has matured more. These teams that raised funding in the last bull market, especially the more savvy ones that built on mobile or with mobile as one of their platforms, these games are finally coming to market. And it's not the early adopter, low quality products that we saw in the most recent bull run of Web3 gaming. And then the last thing is VC capital opening back up. So these teams having the means to bootstrap and say, hey, let's build out an internal UA team, or let's hire an agency. Let's dump 6 figures into paid UA. I mean, a year ago, teams couldn't do that. Everyone's just broke. The policy is changing on the mobile platforms. The games finally coming to market that are more mature and have free-to-play funnels. Shout out to the Web 2.5 mullet again. Free-to-play in the front, blockchain in the back. And then lastly, the funding reopening from the VC world for Web3 gaming.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to call out is the nuclear moment for this. I'll set aside games that we know that Upptic is launching that kind of meet this qualification of free-to-play mobile plus Web3. But the one that we're not working on that I think is going to be wild is the first game from Limit Break, which is Gabe Layden's. For anyone who doesn't remember the Super Bowl ad from a couple years ago, that's Gabe Layden, ex-Machine Zone CEO, his Web3 gaming company. So I've heard plenty of rumors about how they're building out their internal UA team. And that man, like, basically wrote the playbook on world dominating, burn the ships, just take over the entire paid marketing ecosystem with mobile gaming. People do what they know, and people run back their successful playbooks. So I think we're going to see an absolute blitz of paid user acquisition, the likes of which we've not seen for any other Web3 game when Limit Break launches their first game.
And he raised enough money to do it, is the other thing. They raised an insane amount of money.
He's got the funds.
Hundreds of millions. I don't remember the exact number. I mean,
and I'm sure that was part of the pitch.
I'm sure.
In the fundraising decks.
Yeah.
It's like, look what I did in free-to-play mobile. I'm going to do this back in Web3. And my team's uniquely positioned to do it. So shout out to Gabe. It'd be interesting to see what you and your team do with this.
Awesome. Well, a lot of exciting stuff going on. As a reminder, if you're going to be in San Francisco next week for GDC, hit us up. you can hit up me or Warren or email us at marketing@upptic.com.
If you're a game developer, hit us up through the website. We're happy to get you an invite to some of the little events that we're doing. For everyone else who's not headed to GDC, we do stuff here at Upptic to scale games. So if you're building a cool game, we'd love to talk, see how we can help. We do user acquisition stuff. We do creative stuff. We do data stuff. And we have really awesome software platform that we've built in-house that makes all these things more seamless. So if any of that sounds interesting to you and you want help in those areas, reach us through our website. That's upptic.com, upptic.com.
Talk soon.